Hi, this is Randy Randall of No Age and host of the podcast Hyphenate with Randy Randall. I want to welcome our newest sponsor of the show, DistroKid. DistroKid helps musicians get their music on all the major streaming platforms, and artists keep 100% of their royalties. Hyphenate listeners get 30% off at distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate. Again, that's distrokid.com/VIP/HYPHENATE. Go get your music streaming everywhere now.
When we did the original, which was 89, 90, I think, it was for ABC. So this was network television, and this was very unusual for network television. It's almost, you wonder, did they make a mistake and press the wrong button?
What's happening? It's me, Randy Randall. Thank you so much for tuning in to Hyphenate. I am beyond excited this morning to present my interview with an incredibly special guest, Mr. Kyle MacLachlan. He is somebody that we all know from acting, but he really is one of those true hyphenates. I don't know how, maybe we got to come up with a better name. If there's hyphenates, then there's like, whoa, this guy was a real hyphenate. Maybe Renaissance man, I think is what, that would be called in the past. We need some kind of snazzy new hyphen, like Uber hyphenate. He, aside from being an incredible actor with an amazingly quirky, passionate, authentic, honest, acting oeuvre from David Lynch through Showgirls, Sex and the City, Portlandia. He also is a purveyor of fine wines. He owns a winery or a wine label. Maybe there's a winery too. I would imagine that's where wines get made. And it's called Pursued by Bear, and that's up in Walla Walla, Washington. And we talked a little bit about his story and his journey to winemaking, as well as he is also a podcaster. He has an incredible podcast going right now called Varnamtown, which is like a true crime story. It's a real story, and there's crimes involved, and but it's done in just such a David or a Kyle MacLachlan-y kind of way. I want to say David Lynchian kind of way, because it does kind of feel a little bit like a David Lynch story. I think they even acknowledge that at some point. Just the amount of characters and small town, what horror lurks beneath the small town themes and settings. But it was really a pleasure and an honor to talk with Kyle. He's somebody that I've looked up to, I've been a fan of, been an admirer of, been in awe of, for decades. I think first seeing him in Blue Velvet or Twin Peaks, as a young teenager, it was really one of those like, who is this man? What does he know, and how do I do that? I want to go to there. I want to be like Kyle MacLachlan. He just was so cool and just, knew everything going on in the weird world. He just made his mark in such a strong way on screen to my young, impressionable brain. It just seems so cool. So, to get to sit down and chat with him a little bit about winemaking, podcasting, acting. We talk about, the new Dune, interpretation as well as his 1984 Dune, interpretation. We talk about Shakespeare. I was really blown away. It was really an incredible honor. I feel like I could have sat and talked with him for 10 more hours, but obviously he has a life. He has to get on. I do not. On the other hand, I could just sit and just talk Kyle MacLachlan for 10 hours. I'm sure Farley and I will chop up all the great Kyle MacLachlan details on the halftime. But really just special and beyond belief. So stoked that he agreed to sit down and take the time to talk. And I met Kyle doing a water conservation project that I've been working on and off for the last few years. My good friends Kimmy McAtee and Nathan, when I was having coffee with them, talking about projects, and they mentioned that Kyle was environmentally minded, and I thought, this could be really exciting. And I reached out to his social media team, and he's got a great Instagram. If you don't already follow it, you definitely should go give him a follow, because It's hilarious and insightful, and he just seems so cool and down to earth. Obviously, like you'll hear, but really good with his fans and just understanding, just how to be cool. And he's no airs about him whatsoever. Just really down to earth and really just such a great guy. So without any ado, let's go to the interview. But yeah, I want to thank Kyle for taking the time to do this. I want to thank Kimmy and Nathan for introducing me to his social media team, and really, really special conversation. Really a big day for the Hyphenate podcast. Let's go to it. Hi, Mr. Kyle MacLachlan. Thank you so much for joining me on Hyphenate.
I'm so happy to be here, Randy. Good to talk to you.
So good to talk to you. Yeah, it really is a pleasure to sit down with you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day.
Of course, you too.
So so the theme of the show is talking to people who are multi-hyphenates, and in getting to know you a little bit, I know you are a not only an acclaimed legendary actor, but also a winemaker.
Yeah.
And yes.
Thank
So
you.
I thought I was like, oh, right in the alley, right there. I mean, what two very different pursuits, but I imagine they have a lot of relationship to each other. But yeah,
they are similar. They are similar. You're with in both counts. You're making something personal that you want to share with someone, whether it's a film, a television program, or a glass of wine. Something that you've worked hard on, and attempting to create something special for viewer or wine lover.
Yeah, I imagine they're both personal in some ways too, right? You put a lot of yourself into everything, obviously.
Absolutely. Certainly within film and television, I mean that's pretty obvious. But also in the wine world, I'm not on one of those celebrities that just endorses with a name and then lets the brand do whatever it's going to do. I'm heavily involved every step of the way. And my most recent endeavor is creating the label language for a new wine that'll be introduced this fall, a Merlot, and even down to the color of what we call the capsule or the foil that goes on top that wraps over the cork. And so all these little minutia decisions, they all filter through me.
Oh my God, that's so cool. I want to get into acting, but since we're talking on wine, I would love to get started there. I mean, obviously the name of the wine is Pursued by Bear. And this comes from the Winter's Tale, a Shakespeare play.
Correct.
Yeah. What was your what was your relationship
plays
to that play, and how did this kind of this phrase? I mean, it's a famous stage direction, right? Yeah.
It's a super famous stage direction. Super famous is, of course, how Shakespeare described it.
Yes.
But it's a well-known stage. It's a well-known stage direction amongst Shakespeare aficionados and English majors, or anyone who's perhaps watched the play. In Act 3, Scene 3, a bear appears on stage and actually is meant to chase the actor off the stage. And then in the subsequent scene, you find out what actually happened. Another group enters, commenting on the poor fellow, or what was left of him, that they discover on their way in. So the bear was obviously very hungry. It appealed to me because, first of all, it's his most descriptive, unexpected, sort of esoteric stage direction of anything he ever wrote. And it just stands out because of that, I think. And I thought, this would be something that would be really interesting to tag onto a wine. I tried to find another name that was available, but sadly they were all taken, trademarked already. And so I was pretty confident that this was going to be available, and indeed it was. And so I ran with it, so to speak.
It's incredible. And as I understand it, it was almost apropos of nothing. The bear just sort of appears out of nowhere and sort of catches the audience off guard.
He does.
Yeah.
It's exactly what happens. The actor is he's carrying out a task for the king, which is sort of sad task. He has to expose a newborn babe to the wilds because the king is threatened by where it may come, what may happen, and the bear just appears, and it's sort of nature taking its revenge on this poor messenger, really, who's morally troubled by what he is about to do, but he has to. So anyway, and the bear exactly appears out of nowhere, and I'm going to imagine as a member of the audience back then, completely taken by surprise, and like, whoa, what, kind of a thrilling, frightening moment, I think.
Yeah, things that are
Sage.
not often associated with Shakespeare. The action scenes or this kind of
Yeah.
something. So I almost think of it as like a Family Guy cutaway. And now for something completely different. now for
Very
a
much
bear.
like that,
Wait,
I think.
what happened? That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so what was your relationship with
Yeah.
winemaking, and how did you come about it? How does one find themselves here as a winery?
Well, it started with just an interest, in wine, and obviously, I guess not obviously, but I do enjoy wine very, very much. Sometimes more than I should, depending on how I feel the next morning. But it started with just an appreciation and a curiosity about what it was like to actually make wine, and what it took to make good wine, and what was that journey like. And so I started to sort of make some inquiries and look around, and I made the acquaintance of a guy who was in Washington State, where I happened to grow up, not far from where I grew up, in fact, who was a winemaker, and he'd been making wine for about 10 years, and super nice guy. And I just said, would you partner on me? You have the infrastructure already in place and the knowledge, and I'm willing to learn. Can we partner on this wine together? And that started in 2005. That was my first vintage of a Cabernet blend, which I liked. And we started there, and I've been going ever since. So now we're in 2023. I'm currently in my 2020 vintage. So 15 or 16 years of wine.
Wow. It's incredible.
Crazy.
It sounds like a dream.
Yeah. It's a dream, and it's very interesting. It's a journey. It's challenging, satisfying, discouraging. All of those
like
things.
Anything worth doing. If it was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing.
Anything
right?
worth doing.
That's incredible. And you sell mostly through your website, and I imagine there's distributors worldwide, or at least California national. Yeah.
I do have distribution. Yeah, I've got distribution national. I'm also placed in London and the UK, and also in Japan and Tokyo. Those are my two main cities. But I have a distribution around the country, and then I sell online as well. I have a website. I also have a tasting room in Walla Walla, which is in the sort of the southeastern portion of Washington. The east side of Washington is the growing region for wine grapes. It's fantastic. It's not like Seattle at all. It's a dry and sort of arid and very little rainfall and quite hot during the summers, part of the state, and just works wonderfully for growing wine grapes.
That's incredible. And you mentioned growing up in Washington. What was it like growing up in Yakima?
Well, Yakima was a fairly small town that was growing up there was very safe, very comfortable. I grew up in a neighborhood that was that bordered on a park, and we would be in that park all the time playing, baseball or frisbee or throwing the football, and I rode bikes with my friends a lot. That was our main means of transportation when I was a kid, and we would just go out all day on the weekends and just ride around and figure out kind of what to do. We'd go hunting with BB guns or, slingshots, that kind of thing. It was pretty idyllic, I guess. And I had two younger brothers. We spent a lot of time in the summers because it was so warm, near the pool. So we didn't have a pool, but we had my dad was a member of a golf course, so they had a pool there, and so we spent a lot of summers there, and got sunburned very, very badly.
Yeah.
This is before sunscreen.
Yeah.
But it was just a charming, wonderful, easygoing way to grow up. And we were really, I was really lucky in that where we lived was as a former orchard that they had removed the orchard. The trees had gotten to a certain age. They pulled them out and they built this housing development, but they left a few of the older trees around, and my dad took care of them. So I grew up kind of in he had a garden that was extensive. And so my brothers and I were basically cheap labor. So we were in charge of kind of tending, and there was a vegetable garden and a flower garden. And so we had chores, of course, on the weekends and during the summer. And that's where I grew up and really found my love of growing things and being involved in that kind of the farming part of the equation, which is, I think, lent itself to where I found myself in the wine business. I don't grow the grapes myself, but I have nice relationships with my growers, and I really appreciate what they do, and the wine grapes that they grow and that we use to make Pursued by Bear.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's that relationship with nature, sort of early established. Is sort of understanding.
We were surrounded by it as kids.
Yeah, there's a respect and a kind of a knowledge of living in harmony with that. It seems like it would have a lot to do with making wine and kind of understanding what it can do and what it does and doesn't do.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't listen when you want it to do something. It's not going to do it.
No, it's you're really trying. You're working with nature, and sometimes nature is very helpful and kind and will give you a great season, and sometimes not so much, and
sometimes
you get
it's a bear and it chases you off stage.
Yes. You can get into serious trouble. I have a wonderful winemaker, Dan Wampfler is my winemaker, who I've been working with now for almost 16 years. And he is, part of it is being able to roll with the punches a little bit, depending on what the weather brings. So, and he's just he excels at what he does. He's really wonderful. So
that's fantastic. And then where does acting enter your life? Where does that bug hit you, or
well, that has to pay for everything that I
do. No, but I mean, growing up, like when you first started,
I found acting pretty early, pretty early on. I was, I did something in my junior high school, a couple things in junior high school. There was like a kind of a teenage theater group that was kind of happening between a couple of the different schools in Yakima, and I found myself involved with them. Really fun, creative, nice people. I remember we did a melodrama called No, No, a Million Times No, and a couple other things at the Central Washington State Fair on like a little platform stage, that kind of thing. It started with that. And then carried through into high school and then into college, and I kept my toe in it, even in college when I was trying to find something else to do that was more, I don't know, more accepted, I guess. not that acting wasn't. I was never really discouraged by my family, but I didn't really know how you did it for a career, or it was more kind of a hobby thing, something you do on the side, I guess. And then, in college, I more and more, the more I got into it, the more I realized, no, there actually there's a class here. There's actually a 3-year program at the University of Washington that was meant especially to train repertory theater actors in performance. And that was the focus. And I said, well, this is what I want to do. And that started me on a more serious road that had actually an end. You know what I mean? It's like you do all this training, and then the idea is that you go into the workforce and you actually work, and you have access to theaters all around the country. And the idea is you get cast, and you become a gypsy kind of, and you and you tour, and you just kind of work with these different theaters, and based out of New York. That was the idea. So that was my master plan, and that got sidetracked by movies. Suddenly I found myself in Los Angeles. I was like, what the heck? Here I am. Okay. This works for me too.
Mr. Lynch came into your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Regional theater, is this where Shakespeare sort of, where you find Shakespeare or Shakespeare finds you in this kind of this study?
No, it was it was early on. So we studied Shakespeare, of course, in school, and then I graduated early to go to work at the Shakespeare Festival in Ashland, Oregon, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival Association down there. And that was in 1982. And I performed on the main stage in Romeo and Juliet. and a couple other plays. They had Julius Caesar they were doing. They were doing Henry V. So these were all on the main stage, which is a beautiful outdoor theater, sort of a replica of the Globe
Wow.
Theater in London, and was just a imagine a nighttime performances
Yeah.
when the weather was good, which it was most of the time in Southern Oregon, just under the stars performing
In the round?
Shakespeare. It was
Or-
it was actually a thrust stage, but it was really beautifully designed, and it was just spectacular. It's nothing like performing outdoors. If you don't mind, sometimes the geese would get kind of noisy down by the river, but other than that, it was really special. And that started me. That was my first job out of school, my first professional job out of school, and then I followed that up with a play in Seattle. And then while I was doing that, I met the casting director who had come for the first movie I did, which was Dune, the original Dune I think it was released in '84, but we shot that in '83 in Mexico City.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
obviously now Dune has reached everyone's top of mind and is in front and center in the culture once again.
Yes, it is. It is. They've got the second installment of the Villeneuve's Dune. I don't know if he intended a trilogy or not. I think it was just the 1 and 2. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I saw the first one. I enjoyed that very much, and I look forward to seeing this one as well.
That's incredible. Was there ever any talk?
Nice.
Did you speak to anybody or to Denis or anyone reach out to you in regards to
about being in that?
Or,
No,
I don't know.
no,
Or just
no,
okay.
no. There was no conversation about it.
No cameos.
There was some nice.
Yeah.
There was some nice mention on social. People were like, "Oh, you should do this and this." And I said, "Yes, that would be nice," but not going to happen. But I'm excited to see it. It's nice that they had. I don't know the total length of both of the films together, but seems like they had plenty of time to really to tell what is an extremely complex story that Frank Herbert wrote. One that in our attempt was we just basically ran out of time, so I'm looking forward to seeing this this longer version.
Yeah, but I imagine, but what you did on that 1984 film informed so much of the iconography and so much of sci-fi, and I think kind of doubled down what was possible in the effects world and kind of storytelling and large format, kind of big sci-fi with a capital S and a capital.
Yeah, it was like that. I mean, it did feel like it was. It's always kind of a throwback. If you look at Dune and you related it or compared it to Star Wars or Alien, it was a completely different sensation. A different sensory experience, all in. Visually and everything.
Yeah.
So felt kind of old. Throwback.
Well, in any of the relations, I think the source material of Frank Herbert's novels came before things, like the Sand and the Sand Planet and Star Wars. There obviously was a lot of groundwork that was laid by Frank Herbert's novels that would go on to influence either directly or just indirectly within that world. Yeah.
Oh, you can see it. Yeah, and still has impact. Even as recent as the Mandalorian and some. I mean, even current those images that Frank Herbert wrote about are the desert planet seem to always make their way into a sci-fi show somewhere, right?
And what was your relationship to sci-fi or films and just in general prior to being cast in something so immense as this?
I mean, I really like sci-fi. It was a great escape for me when I was in school, and even before that, when I was roughly about the age that Paul was, and when we meet him in the book around 15, I was an avid reader of sci-fi and Dune in particular. When I finally a friend of mine suggested I read it, and when I finally was able to get through the first 60 pages, it took me 2 or 3 times just because there's so much, the density of it, and there's so many references and ideas. It's really hard to keep track of everything. I had to go back and start again.
Just wrapping your mouth around some of those words and names of things too.
Oh,
yeah. Right? It's
what they were.
If you haven't heard it pronounced, you're just kind of coming up with your own pronunciation.
Yeah, it's that's exactly sort of what you're fighting with. But I became a huge fan of Dune, and I've spoken about reading the book many, many times. A couple times a year, I would go back to it because it just really meant so much to me, and I loved that journey. And then, cut to a few years later, there I was um, auditioning in a hotel room in Seattle, Washington, with a casting director to, going on tape that she then took to David Lynch and Rafaela De Laurentiis, the line producer on that, and
Mm-hmm.
they had me down to Los Angeles, flew me down to Los Angeles to meet, and the rest, as they say, is history, I guess.
Incredible. Have you become familiar with the Jodorowsky kind of pre-plan and pre-production that went in
I
prior to
have.
your film? Is that that there was a documentary, the Jodorowsky's Dune. I mean,
Yeah,
it was,
which was really interesting to see. Again, I'm kind of crazy about all things Dune, which is why
mhm.
I'm looking forward to seeing the second installment of Villeneuve's Dune. I just love the book. I love the story. I love the characters. And Jodorowsky's was again another kind of interesting take, sort of obviously eccentric and unusual. The cast that he had assembled was remarkable. The people that he worked with, or that he had lined up to do the creation for the creators. I'm thinking of Geiger, for
H.R.
example.
Geiger, yeah.
Yeah, he went on, of course, to Alien and other great things. So the Jodorowsky had really put together what would have been a kind of a dream team, I think, at that time in that
Hmm.
era to make this movie, and that would have been really interesting to have seen as well. I don't know how they would have pulled it off, but it would have been cool to watch.
Yeah, I played a music festival in Mexico City, and Jodorowsky's son was one of the artists also playing at the
Oh
festival,
wow!
and I wanted to to speak to him about what his training was. According to the documentary, it sounded like his father was almost putting his real life son through many of the trials and tribulations that Paul would go through in the film, and that he
Yeah,
was
he
really
did.
trying to train him to be a sort of in real life Paul. But our
Yeah,
paths didn't cross. I saw his set, and we had to go on right after, and it was
uh,
kind of one of those hustle bustles of being backstage.
yeah.
But it
Would
was
have been
so
interesting
fascinating.
to talk with him, right? That would have been
Yeah.
cool just to learn kind of what that was. Must have been very challenging. Probably because he was young at the time. I think kind of
Hmm.
roughly around the age that Paul should have been, and I wonder how he remembers that time. It'd be cool to
Yeah,
find
yeah, I
out.
know. I was so curious.
Yeah.
Um, so it's incredible. Then from there, thrust into Hollywood. I mean, but as a very young man, and a huge leap just to sort of jump. Where
Yeah.
where did where did you find yourself? In this kind of way. What was as a young person, kind of experiencing this all for the first time. Like, what was it
Yeah.
like?
I had sort of an unusual journey into Hollywood in that I came from afar. I came from Seattle to Los Angeles, but I kind of bypassed Los Angeles, and I went straight from Seattle to Mexico City. I shot down in Mexico City for about 7 months, finished that up. I was contractually obligated at the time. I was not able to film, be on television or be seen on television or in a feature film um, until our Dune came out, till it was released.
Wow.
So I was not able to work in Hollywood. So I didn't go to Hollywood. So I went back to Seattle and did a play again, went back into the theater and kind of bided my time until the movie was released. At which point in time, I fully expected to start on either the next Dune picture or to do Blue Velvet, which was David's. I think it was going to be his next thing. We were meant to start that in January, but with the reception that Dune got, which was not
Mm.
was fairly cool, and people didn't really like the movie. All that went out the window, and I was left kind of going, well, now what do I do now? And it was like, well, now it's time to get to Hollywood. And so I drove down to Los Angeles in January of '85 and found a place to live with the help of some friends, and started the process of auditioning. I had an agent. I had some of the accoutrement in place, I guess. I had an agent. I had a lawyer working for me, and I started going out and auditioning, really. And reception was a little chilly. I think the part of the demise of Dune, I guess, the first one, sort of was I was carrying a little bit on my shoulders, and people were sort of less than interested in working with me. But David Lynch came back around again, and we ended up starting on Blue Velvet in August of that year, August of '85, and had a great experience with that, and worked with some really wonderful people, and sort of fell back in love with movies. Making a movie, which the first one was Dune, and I really enjoyed that, and then kind of was left kind of with a bad taste, and then Blue Velvet came around, and I was like, oh, this is great. This is why I'm doing it, and then it just kind of started to pick up speed from there, little by little. And from Blue Velvet, I went to do The Hidden, which is a really fun sci-fi movie.
It's great.
And then I worked with Oliver Stone on The Doors. Shot Twin Peaks. Happened right about that time, and so things began to kind of pick up a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's wild because I mean, obviously, Dune's the reception of Dune and sort of where it landed. You say it lands on your shoulders, but so much of it, so very little of it actually has to do with you. I mean, obviously, you have a Dino De Laurentiis, production. You have a director, and there's so many other decisions in how it's positioned within the marketplace and all the other things that are that are fun and not so glamorous about Hollywood. Have very little to do. You have no control or no say over that. However, what if it wins or loses? It's on your shoulders.
It's just the nature of the world, and
cuts both ways. If it's a huge success, very little to do with you, to the point of you played your role, but an actor on the stage, and so much of it, that's incredible.
It was an interesting process, and had it been a huge success, there would have been Dune 2, and then Dune 3, and God knows how long that would have gone on, but
well, then there's a whole other can of worms that happens with stuff like that. You can tell there's many actors out there who have had large, sci-fi successes that have, found it difficult to sort of move up past that. That's incredible. But the collaboration with David Lynch obviously was sort of born out of that.
It was, and thank God for that. Not only a working collaboration and great respect, but also a deep friendship with someone who I really, really care for. And we were together on Dune, we were together on Blue Velvet, we were on Twin Peaks, and then again the return of Twin Peaks. So we've had a chance to do a few things together that have been really not only memorable in terms of working, but also I think we've made some very interesting material, made some very interesting films together and television programs together, and very, 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 very proud of that.
Yeah. I mean, I've read online and just kind of in doing research, and obviously just as a fan myself, that there's almost a theory online, if you will, and it may not be clear to you, but I'm just curious how, in terms of, multiple collaborations and sort of your embodiment of his characters on the screen, how close is your portrayal to who he is in some ways, or some, I think it's been written, it's almost that you are the embodiment of the David Lynch character that he sees himself as, or as he portrays that. I mean, how do you speak to that? Is there, obviously there's a lot of creativity involved in there, but is there a line from that you're able to see?
I think I care, his thinking of Blue Velvet, I think his curiosity, his idea, carrying through that story. I think I'm his eyes and ears in a way. I think moving through that story,
as you are of the audience as well, just as a main character. You are how we the audience see the film as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty much your guide through the Blue Velvet experience, and that's an e-ticket ride for those of you who remember Disneyland from way back when. Anyway, but there are definitely there's. I think some of the phrases are definitely come from David or are influenced by David. The way Jeffrey speaks, sort of true with Dale Cooper as well. There's certain mannerisms and rhythms that I borrowed from David. And then so excited when David actually decided to place himself into the world of Twin Peaks as the character of Gordon Cole. And I know that Twin Peaks, the world of Twin Peaks means a lot to David. It's still, it's still alive and well and percolating along in his brain. So the fact that he could be involved in it was a real treat and fun for me as well. So
Then
and then
it becomes a meta text almost in a way where yours is almost the text of interpreting the guide as he sees it through the world, and then for him
yeah,
to actually place himself now as almost as a foil to you. He's now
yeah,
meta textual conversation within himself as a
yeah.
totem, and then him placing himself almost not in opposition, but you're almost he's slightly
Well, certainly
above yeah
boss. Yeah, there's
yeah
sort of
yeah
my boss. You know what I mean? Which I
yeah
think is a very funny. You're right
yeah.
that he would come into that relationship, and in some ways, David is like an older brother to me.
Mm.
I'm not quite old enough to be like a parental figure, but certainly an older brother. The older brother, the artist in the family who went on, and created these amazing
Yeah.
things. And then, of course, when I got to the return, David asked me to do three different
Oh
characters.
my
There was
God.
certainly the character of Agent Cooper 25 years later, so that's slightly different. And then the character of Dougie, and then the character of Mr. C, or the doppelganger. Um, those were really wonderful and challenging to play, and not at all like anything I'd done before, or not at all like myself or David. So they were true creations that came from another place, and really challenging and fun to do.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, what a roller coaster. My wife and I were so excited. We watched every episode as they came out. I don't know if I've
Cool.
given myself up as a huge fan if you haven't been able to tell, but yeah, I mean that the return was such a ride. I think it was
Yeah.
episode 5 was the kind of the dialogueless one, where there was no, and it was just gorgeous. I couldn't believe we were
Yeah.
able to get something so abstract and so gorgeous,
Well,
just
certainly on
kind of these
television.
at
You
that
know,
time. Yeah.
yeah. When we did with the original, which was 89, 90, I think it was for ABC. So this was network television, and this was very unusual for network television. It's almost, you wonder, did they make a mistake and press the wrong button to allow us to see this? And then, of course, when we were at Showtime, and they were very generous, certainly very generous with David, allowing him to really have full reign of control on what he wanted to do. And we got classic David Lynch for those 18 episodes.
Yeah. And did it feel like even in making the first 2 seasons, did it feel as though did we, barbarians at the gate? How did we get in here? Did it feel like that, or did it seem as though everything's right as rain? This is just what's supposed to be happening on ABC. I mean, obviously there was a warm reception to it at the time.
Yeah, there was a really warm reception. We ended up doing the pilot was made and viewed, and then deemed to be worthy of making more.
Mhm.
So then they shot another 7, 8, I think, or 8 episodes. I always get confused. I think we did 7 episodes, then plus the pilot, it became 8. And those were all finished before anything went to air. So we'd completed the first season. It was a what do they call it? A mid-season replacement. That's what it was called back then.
Yeah.
So those were ready to go, and they put them on the air, and the reception was crazy, obviously, and went through the roof. And ABC said, "Oh well, we're going to make another season," and then we sat down to work on something like 23 episodes, 22, 23 episodes. I mean, can you imagine trying to do? I know that's still done, but it's just like that
Oh
just
yeah.
seems inhumane to the writers and to the crew to try and do 23 shows.
Yeah.
It's impossible to come up with 23 different stories. Anyway, so we ended up doing that, of course, the second year. And, as we got into it, I think once they solved the murder mystery, who killed Laura Palmer,
Yeah.
the show sort of lost steam. That was such a powerful question that once it was answered, I think people kind of, were less interested, honestly.
But again, like you said, speaking to the 22 episode order is almost in a way of reaction to like, well, here's where the story goes. And obviously respect to you and to the creative crew. They're like, well, this is the story. the story ends here, and then there's more here, or this particular story. It's sort of, rather than drawing it out, you could have 5 seasons. You have 10 seasons of with a
Oh yeah.
a breadcrumb trail, as you go. But there was a sort of like respect to a visionary, to stories in a vision there. They're like, no, this is how this ends, and then this is our denouement, or our kind of our lasting. Was there ever talk of a season 3, or did it feel as though 2 was going to be the end?
No, I think there was an expectation that for the first, the first Twin Peaks, that there was potentially a season 3. I think that was, and honestly, as an actor, I was very interested, because this would have been the beginning of the Cooper's fall from grace, and I thought they did it in such an interesting way, a compelling way, that I was certain we were going to go back for a 3rd season. And then ABC said, well, your numbers are just not where they need to be, or they came up with, there's always a reason.
Sure. Yeah.
Whether it's the real reason or
it's not you, it's me.
There's always a reason.
Yeah. There's something.
Yeah. So like, okay. So that was the end of Peaks for that, very a meteoric rise, and then kind of a slow and steady sort of falling off.
It's so interesting that you say almost like the fall of Agent Cooper. I mean, it almost follows narratively the books, the Frank Herbert books, of where Paul would have went as well. Kind of the turn of Paul's character into into the darker side of it, or sort of what happens when power corrupts, and in that kind of way.
The great phrase, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. So, and I think you're right. Dune Messiah, the second book, is really about Paul coming back and sort of pointing fingers at what he created, or what came of his leadership, what he thought he was doing something great, and he comes back and absolutely, you realize it was a completely destructive
and has force. To pay for his heroics, almost in a way. That's like, yes, you have to answer to that. Which is, I'm curious to see where that will go, but I'm also curious, do audiences want that? I mean, it's a big kind of almost like turning the mirror back on the audience. Like, you cheer for the bloodshed and the violence, we're all here eating your popcorn, but it almost puts the audience on the left foot. How are you gonna, how do you react to this?
If it makes enough money, they'll be back.
But there's enough popcorn buckets out there.
Very simple equation, I think. Randy, very simple equation.
It's been so fascinating. But I also want to touch on not only winemaking and acting. I mean, there's another 30 years of acting I also want to touch on, so I don't want to end here, but I do want to make sure we give time to Varnamtown. You're also now a podcaster. How do you, the story? It's fascinating. I love. I just listened, not to timestamp this, but to episode 6 when it came out, and I'm riveted. I'm hanging on every chapter. This will probably come out once the season has wrapped. So, but no spoilers. I want everyone to go back and start it. Yeah. No spoilers for me either. But we're going to start at episode 1.
You don't want to know how it ends. Oh.
Well, I do want to know, but I want to let you guys, spool it out one episode at a time. But how did this come to you? How did podcasting find you? And
this, well, good question. Yeah, no, this story came to me years before I thought about moving into the world of podcasts. Podcasts were not really a thing yet when I first heard of the story. It came through a friend of a friend, and I just thought it was a fascinating idea that this little tiny town in North Carolina on the coast became such an important hub for drug smuggling, when I had always just thought Miami was the place, you know what I mean? And it was. Miami was the place for a number of years, and a lot of violence ensued. And I think that's part of the reason that they were looking for other avenues in which to import this, massive amounts of drugs coming up from South America. And Varnamtown was the idyllic little spot, tiny community, off the beaten track, middle of nowhere, seaside, surrounded by waterways that were very difficult to navigate. You would have local knowledge. And it was a depressed community at that time. It was a shrimping community, and they weren't doing well. And they were just ripe for this opportunity to make a lot of money, serving as kind of the the import export business, I guess, bringing
The
in
hub.
marijuana, cocaine, quaaludes, whatever came up in South America, in huge amounts. At one point, I think at one point it was the largest importation site on the eastern seaboard. Which,
My
when you
God.
see the community, when you visit it, which is what we did, and you look around, it's pretty hard to believe, but these were just a bunch of shrimp boats going out and bringing in stuff from the mothership that was anchored offshore. There were also airports. They weren't really airports. They were airfields, I guess, in which planes were landing full of drugs being offloaded,
REO
packed up in trucks.
Speedwagon
And
planes.
yeah,
Yeah.
the one that we talk about in the podcast, which is a funny story, is that the REO Speedway, the plane that the band actually used, a touring plane, was purchased and used to bring drugs in, and they never bothered to take the logo off the side of the plane, which I thought was kind of a stroke of genius. I thought, because it's sort of, REO Speedwagon's coming to
It's a
town.
great
How
cover.
great is that? Yeah, great cover.
Yeah, but also
Crazy.
places it in time so perfectly too. When you can,
Yeah.
as a listener, you're imagining that, like, okay, I know the era we're thinking of when REO Speedwagon has their own freight plane. This is that time. But how did
where you are?
did the story come to you through socializing with somebody who knew the story, like, oh, you wouldn't believe this, and like a tale that gets told at a dinner party, or how did the story?
No, actually, it came to me through a friend of my wife's, a business partner of my wife's, actually, who knew the woman who had moved. This is sort of like in that place that Jack built. It always ends up like that. Anyway, it was a woman had moved from Philadelphia to Varnamtown to retire, and she was a successsul soap tycoon, organic soap tycoon.
I remember hearing her.
Yeah.
She's in there,
And so the partner that Desiree was working with had helped her sell her company and had heard this story along the way when she had moved down to North Carolina, and she had met this person, and she had heard his story, and then she told it to our friend, and then our friend relayed it to Desiree, and then my wife, and then she told me about it, and we were like, this is a very unusual story. So we sort of sat with it for a while, and then over time, sort of podcasts became a thing, and I thought, this would actually be a cool way to tell the story for a number of reasons. So one, it's a great tale. Second of all, if you're doing a podcast, you're listening to voices, and I said, what can be more compelling than listening to these very, very specific and unusual accents that come from that part of the world, and to hear the story told in people's own words. And I thought that would be really fun, and also just to have a couple of guys coming in from out of town who don't know anything, me and Josh Davis, my partner in this, investigative reporter Josh Davis, asking questions and seeing if people really wanted to tell what went on back then. And turns out they really did. And it couldn't be more descriptive, interesting in terms of hearing it from their actual mouths. So
absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you guys have done such a great job at finding the curious nuggets, and then kind of spinning the web of the plot, kind of unfolds from these kind of moments of like that hit you kind of sideways, and it's compelling. It's just compelling storytelling. From minute one, it's really great.
Yeah, there's some twists and turns in there that are truly unexpected and sort of delightful in just their insanity.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so looking forward to finishing it and to seeing how it all ends. But it's really, so you had the story and you brought it to Josh and kind of asked him to partner with you on it in terms of kind of writing the script and going down, uncovering the people, getting boots on the ground almost.
Yeah, we did. I spoke to Josh. This is his thing. He's done a number of these. He is a writer, an investigative journalist. He's been in situations around the world that have been both humorous and also life threatening. So I thought, he's the guy.
I loved his sandwich story where he would the neighbor that would play what was the song? This the '60s Motown song. Every
yes.
he'd stand on the fence with a sandwich to ask him like, what are we doing?
We were talking about that recently. That this neighbor would every day at the same time and for hours and it literally like just they could almost reach out and touch the window. The houses
Oh,
were that close together. And
yeah.
so Josh finally just one day he kind of he cracked, and he walked over and he kind of climbed the fence and just leaned up against the fellow's, tapped on the window, and turns out the guy was in there sitting on the toilet or something, and then they had a conversation, and it's fun. It's fun to hear that. We relay this little story in the course of the podcast, just as part of a little sidebar. But it's a very interesting
But it's great. But
approach.
it speaks to Josh's character too, and I think you guys kind of talk about conflict solving and the kind of the creative ways of neighbors, neighbors telling on neighbors, or neighbors, the pressure of what it means to be a neighbor, which is
Yeah.
thematic, to the story of Varnamtown. It's a really neighbor.
Yes.
It's a very small, tight knit community, for better and worse. It sounds like. And
Yeah.
so just kind of reflecting on your own adventures with neighbors and what that kind of means, and I think everyone can relate to that.
You hit it right on the head, and that's part of it's an integral part of the fabric, really, of Varnamtown. Or it's all, it's about the people. What happens when suddenly they have all this money just pouring in? I think we use the term of a fire hose of money and drugs coming into this community, and what happens to those relationships. And at the end, without any spoilers, you'll see that actually there's a resolution there. There's an interesting resolution to everything that is somewhat unexpected.
Oh, I can't wait!
Yeah.
And then is there hopes for developing the story further? I mean, I could see this being obviously prestige television. I could see this being a narrative sort of piece. Is that in the hopes of it, or is it really just something that lives and breathes in an audio world?
No, we're actively meeting right now with creators to move this story into probably more of a series type of format. And as you listen to the podcast and as you get familiar with the characters and the people, you begin to, I mean, I don't know, like me, but I begin to see images and faces, and I begin to see them, and I think what's happening as we're taking these meetings is it's becoming clearer and clearer that there's really a wonderful potential cast of characters here, and the storytelling, the depth of what could be done is extensive. We did a fair amount of research. We were there for about 6 days doing interviews, and maybe a third of what we learned is actually in the podcast. There's so much more that we weren't able to sort of bring in or tie together. But it's quite an intricate story and web that we discovered. Yeah. And hopefully, as we proceed down this road and something were to happen, we would be able to expand this story into some of these other areas, which I think are equally as fascinating.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, I mean, it's brother against brother. It's corrupt, law enforcement, politicians, all the way up to Ronald Reagan. There's a great, I think as you're telling the story, they're writing letters to Ronald Reagan, like, so we got to do something about this.
Can you, it's like, and so making an appeal to the president, that things were so tough and crazy.
But that's how
to some
desperate
of the people.
It was.
There were people there that were actually absolutely opposed to what was happening, and they didn't have anywhere else to turn, as you said, because local law enforcement was in the pocket of the drug dealers. And so one fellow took it upon himself to write a letter to Ronald Reagan and appeal to try to get him to help what was happening down there. It's crazy.
Oh man. Well, I can't wait to finish the story in its podcast form, and then to see, I will be on bated breath to see where it lands next in a visual format as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was really fantastic. Well, Kyle, I don't want to keep you, too long, but I really appreciate you taking the time here. We covered winemaking and obviously your incredible legacy, famed acting career. I mean, we'll only a few thoughts on just in the acting world. I wanted to touch on, King Claudius in the 2000s Hamlet with Ethan Hawke, just to kind of tie the bow on our Shakespeare thing. Like, what was that experience? Was that, as far as I could see in my research, that was your only on film Shakespeare?
Yeah, that was the only one on film. It was a remarkable experience working with Michael Almereyda, the director, a very, very talented, interesting guy, makes interesting films, and a cast that was just remarkable in its breadth. I mean, from Ethan Hawke playing Hamlet, Julia Stiles playing Ophelia, We had Sam Shepard as Hamlet's father, Bill Murray as Polonius, Liev Schreiber was in. Diane Venora was my Gertrude.
Yeah. I was just at the
on
right
and
age.
on.
I graduated high school in '99. So this was, this was my first
Okay.
year of college. So this is like right prime.
Yeah.
I was
It's
the
a
audience.
great way. It's a great way to introduce yourself to Hamlet, which is, a fairly complicated story, but the way that Michael did it, set in modern time with the verse, and then it was heavily annotated, but it was just a dream come true, and seat of the pants. I mean, we were in some of those scenes we had one take, and that's all we got because we were running out of time, we're running out of light, and so, but it came together just beautifully, and
It was
I
alive.
think it's still
lived.
up there.
Yeah, it lived for me in a way that was, I think, as a younger, audience, I was 19 at the time, and kind of just like, oh, okay, this is the Bard's world alive and living and happening and tactile in a way that, you just don't. Depending how you get to it through school, or I think it's always best to hear it and see it rather than reading it. I think it was a lot of reading.
Yeah, which is what Shakespeare is meant to be heard, meant to be seen, not to be read.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think and it's really well put, and I thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And then also your voice acting. I mean, obviously, through the podcast, you have a great voice for that, but also, with many roles, you found another kind of avenue, another hyphenate to add to the to the long list of accomplishments. But your voice acting, how have you found that, and how do you like doing those roles, like Inside Out and Gravity Falls, a lot of these things?
Yeah. They're fun. They're really fun. They don't involve a tremendous amount of time, which is great. So going into work on Inside Out, playing Riley's dad on that was a real pleasure. First of all, you're working with just the nicest people. The Pixar folks are all terrific and incredibly creative, great ideas, and receptive to thoughts and ideas. They were very open to my thoughts and my ideas too, which was really nice that when that happens. But that's been fun, and I like working on a microphone. I really enjoy it, and I growing up when I was in school, people weren't really crazy about my voice, but I think, as I've gotten older, I think it's gotten gotten better, rounder, deeper, maybe. I don't know, but I really
it's fantastic. No, it's such a signature sound, and it sounds great. Did you do the short as well, where with Riley's boyfriend? Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I love it with
it's
AC/DC,
really funny.
And he gets the bass out and he gets everything. Oh my God! I mean, yeah. as a musician, father with two young children, I watched that and just howled and like, oh my God! Okay, you have my number here. Like I felt seen. I was like, oh, okay, I know. I see what's coming for me down the road.
Yeah. Thanks. I love it.
It's fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I have a 4-year-old and a 10-year-old. So we're consumers of a lot of animation. And so when I hear your voice come up, I'm like, oh, okay, here's Kyle. Here we are.
Okay.
It adds a certain gravity or another layer that I can read as the parents. Like, okay, this is fun.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That's great, Randy.
Yeah. Well, it's been really, cool. Really nice sitting with you. I appreciate you taking the time here and sitting down. It's, it's incredible. It's been such an honor. And like I say, I could go on and on I want to ask you about, playing keyboards as Ray Manzarek. I want to go on and, I want to talk about, there's a lot of other stuff in there, but I think, we'll kind of put a pin in it for now. And if there's ever anything comes up down the road, maybe we could pick it up for a part 2, but I really appreciate it.
We can revisit. My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, I know. And then even getting into the wine of things as well, too. I wanted to talk about, wine on film and all these other things. You have a Merlot coming out, which according to, some people is sacrilege to have.
Yes, it's true.
In a post-sideways
Don't do a Merlot.
World. Yeah. Everybody,
the challenges that Washington State, the Merlot that comes out of Washington State is some of the best in the world, I think. So I feel like if people
Alexander
can get past
Payne has
the idea,
something to reckon with then.
Yes. Yes, yeah, and he has a lovely movie, I know, The Holdovers, which is really
Yes.
good. He's quite a great filmmaker.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
the people who
exciting.
like Merlot don't like him, but everybody else likes him.
Everybody else can. Well, I think those characters had a lot of other problems. I think you always have to check the source of the
That's true.
information you're getting. I don't know if you're gonna believe the Merlot conspiracy, but but look at everything else those characters did in the film. So you have to understand. Maybe it's part of their flawed
Yeah,
characters, part of their
I agree.
flawed symptoms they had.
I agree. I agree.
Well, thank
Well,
you so
you
much.
just Paul Giamatti is such a great actor that he was very convincing when in his feelings of disgust for Merlot. So that's the power of the actor. Be careful what you say and do.
It's incredible, right? Yeah, yeah. We need.
Thanks, Randy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
Appreciate
thank
that.
you so much, Kyle, for your time. I appreciate it. Oh my God. How cool is that? Kyle motherfucking MacLachlan. I was just beside myself. Really couldn't help but nerding out as much as I did. Hopefully, it wasn't too embarrassing, and there was actually some cohesive questions I could ask. Yeah, I think Twin Peaks was really definitely one of those things in my life that just I got completely wrapped up in and really lost. I mean, it's one of those things that definitely you can get lost in, as well as Dune. These kind of world making pieces of fiction, and yeah, I was trying my best to not just go, oh, remember that time? Trying to get full Chris Farley. Yeah, okay. Remember when you said that thing? But then I also realized after the fact too, like, oh, so stupid. I should have asked him about working with David Bowie in Fire Walk with Me, or working with Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet. Why, I'm sure there's a million great stories he has, but I was just so caught up in like, oh God, it's Kyle MacLachlan. I couldn't think of anyone else to even ask about. I just wanted to hear his experience, and yeah, it was completely enthralling, fascinating. What a great dude. Really cool, really fun. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Hopefully nobody else peed their pants like I did while the interview was going on. But yeah, Farley and I will be back on Monday to break it down. I'll review more of my nerdiness and all the other questions I thought I could have asked. But yeah, have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Thank you.